Now today I'm going to show you how to use opaque white paint within your watercolour paintings and the 4 different consistencies which I prefer to use whilst working on my detailed wildlife paintings. Okay, let's get the brushes wet, shall we? And let's get started. Now I tend to work on 4 different consistencies when I'm working with opaque white, or watercolour white as I very often call it. And these will be watery, milky, creamy and then thick. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. So, first things first, let's go for a watery version of this opaque white. And this is watercolour white, so it's not gouache or acrylic or anything like that. Just opaque white. There you go. So nice and watery. Now, when it's watery, what will happen is that the paint will fade as it dries. Okay, so I'm going to paint that on there. So that will start to fade. And the more water you add into the white, the more faded that white will be. When I'm painting white fur, I tend to use this method quite a lot, especially for those areas which are shaded. But look how that's faded down quite a lot. And the more water you add, the more faded that white will be, as you can see. Let's add a little bit more pigment to that water now. So it's going to be slightly thicker. Still quite watery though. But look at the difference this has made already, just by being a little bit thicker. But you can see there's still very watery, still like tap water there. Let's thicken it down a little bit more, but this time I'm going to make it more to a milky consistency. It's just a little bit thicker than tap water. Okay, so that's probably something like that there. And let's see how bright that white becomes now. Look at the difference that's made just by thickening that white down just a touch. And you can imagine when you're working with fur or feathers or anything like that, the effect you can work on when you're working on a darker background like this here, and you're trying to create more of a fur texture like this, imagine like a white dog. This would work really, really well without being too bright. But look at the difference that's made just by working on that there. Now let's thicken this down again. So this is now going to be more of a creamy consistency. It's a little bit thicker. Okay, here we go, ready? Now look at the strength of that white now, how bright that white is, and that's not even thick yet. Yes, you can go over the top of the white again once it's dry, but you've got to do that in one light pass otherwise it starts to move the paint underneath. But that, just by using more of a creamy consistency white, works really, really well when you're wanting some brighter white areas like this here. Okay, when you're working with fur or feathers, for example. Let's thicken that down again, so hardly any water whatsoever. That's really thick actually, isn't it? Very thick. So this should be more or less bright white now. Now there's a variety, look at that, there's a variety of white paints on the market which you can use. It's a matter of finding the right one for you, but look at the difference just this one white has made, from a really pale shade all the way through to bright white. If you want it brighter, as I said, you can go over the top of that line again, with another layer, preferably when it's dry though, it's not quite dry on there yet. And that would be really, really bright. But you can imagine working with things like whiskers, that kind of idea. So again, this is a fully loaded brush. And look how bright white that is. If we take some of that paint off that brush, you can see, then get some very fine white lines there to create that bright effect. Now there's a variety of white paints on the market, there really is. And this is obviously water-based. So it's not acrylic or anything like that. So watercolour white. Opaque white, something like that. As long as it's opaque. It needs to be opaque, not semi-opaque or anything like that. But there's quite a variety on the market. I've got a video, by the way, on testing some of these out. Just to give us some idea on the ones I've tried out and the effect that they give. I'll pop a link to the top right-hand corner for you so you can see the one I mean, okay? Now I know that white paint is not something that everybody uses. I knew that, I know. Because a lot of people prefer to reserve the white of the paper. So, you know, it's a personal thing really. It's a personal option whether you want to use white paint. But for me, when you're working on a wildlife painting and you want to reserve those lighter areas within, say, a cat's fur or dog's fur or a stoat or anything like that, it's very difficult to do that when you're working with fine details. So when you add white over the top, it can be quite effective. You can see that from the video I'm just showing you there. So it's well worth considering doing that, it really is. Another technique, I'm going to show you how to do some splattering as well. So I'll do that on this painting here, and you've probably been wondering why that's there in the first place. Well, I'll show you in a minute, okay? I'll show you the splattering technique which I've done for that video. Oh, and by the way, if you are interested in painting this particular picture here, just a very easy kind of star effect, that's all this is. Nothing fancy, nothing too difficult. I'll pop a link to the top right hand corner again for that one for you, okay? So you have a play with that. But for now, I want to show you how I worked on all this splattering technique, working with watercolour white. Now then, white paint. So if I get rid of that one, I'm going to get some opaque white paint. You can use white gouache, not a problem at all. Anything that's easy for you to kind of get hold of, stay. Now grab yourself a stiff bristle brush like this one. Also some water, just down the bottom here, out of the way. First thing to do, grab a little bit of paint and also some water. And then what you need to do is bring your finger back like this. You can use an old toothbrush instead, by the way, if you wanted to. And then splatter over the top of the paper, you ready? But very lightly, don't bring it back too far. Just a little bit to begin with, like that. Then let go. And you can see straight away. Look at them fine splatter marks we got on there. Very effective, isn't it? Whoa, look at that. Brilliant. The key is not to overload the brush too much, or the toothbrush, whatever you're using. Just be gentle with it. Don't put too much on. And there you go. Straight away, we've got more like a starry nighttime sky. Just like that. Yay. Now please support my channel by clicking on the subscribe button down below and also that like button as well. At least by doing that, when I put another video on here on YouTube for you to watch, there's a good chance that you shouldn't miss it. Now I did mention whiskers, didn't I? So if I get my size 2 brush again, and make this more of a milky consistency. We'll try that first of all. Okay. Load the brush, give it a roll, pull away, give it a tap or two on some kitchen roll. And you've got to think about the natural arc of your wrist, okay, as you're doing this. And sort of ghost the area first. So if you're thinking about, you got the nose around here, you've got a whisker coming away from that. So let's just try that a minute. So think about ghosting it, and then, very lightly, barely touching the paper, create a whisker. Let's do another one, shall we? So about there, we'll start there, and lift off. See that natural sort of fluid movement you've got going there? Do one from there from a different angle, overlapping. Like that. And go really fine with this. Depends how much paint you've got on the brush as well. So the more paint you've got on the brush, the thicker the line will be. And also you need a very fine tip brush to be able to do this with as well. I very often use a size 00, but this one's got quite a nice tip on it, the size 2. You can see I've not reloaded this brush either when I've been working on this because I've still got plenty of paint on that brush. Eventually you find it will start to break apart on the paper. And at that point you want to probably reload, give it a tap or two again, and then start again to create those whisker marks. You can see the effect by adding whiskers just by using opaque white. But this time more to a milky consistency. So if I thicken that white down and I want some really bright white whiskers, yeah, you've got to make sure it's paintable, that's the thing, because you find that if you don't, the white paint will just break apart on the paper. So you want it thick enough so it's white, so it's really bright white, but also thin enough so it spreads, okay? So again, load it, give it a tap or two. Let's try a brighter, whiter line. I've probably got too much paint on this brush, but we'll try. So nice and slow and gentle. That sort of natural arc on your fingers and your wrist if you want to use your wrist. Let's try one overlapping that one now. So probably from about there. And pull away. So you can see I'm lifting off right at the very end whilst I'm doing this. But that's the way I would tend to work with whiskers. If I try doing a curve this way, using white paint, what will happen is that my hand will sort of create more of a jagged edge. So I just did that there. It's not smooth enough. Trying to do this sort of angle. Doing it that way around is better. So you need to turn your paper around when you're doing whiskers going from a different direction using watercolour white. But again, work with different consistencies. Try different ideas out while working with the white. Try splattering like I've just shown you on that video clip. There's so many different ways of working with it, there really is. And also, don't forget, you can overlay it with paint as well, with a little bit of colour over the top if you want to. So there's a thicker line. Take some paint off and create a thinner line. If I wanted some whiskers which are really, really pale, you need to use more water than pigment. Okay. And I mentioned that you can overlay the white paint with colour as well. Let's get a little bit of brown. This is burnt sienna. Let's go over this one here first of all. Look at this. And you can see, just by using a little bit of burnt sienna, we can keep it on track, the effect you can get by having the white underneath. But if I keep running over the top of that, just like there, it will start to blur that white. So you have to do it very lightly and very swiftly as well. And there's some of the effects that you can get by working with watercolour white. The answer is try it out on some scrap watercolour paper first of all, before you go to your main painting, okay? This that way around you've got sort of an idea how it's going to work. So do what I've done, put a block of colour down first of all on some scrap watercolour paper. Always use scraps, by the way, from old paintings that you've thrown in the bin or about to throw in the bin. And use the backs of those scraps like I've got here. By doing so, you've got plenty of testing paper just to try out ideas before you go to your main painting. Well, you know that starry scene I've got on the right hand side of this paper here? If you fancy having a go at that, it's a very easy project to work on. Click on the link to the top right hand corner of the screen. I'll see you there.